This is Peter Laws in Norman, Oklahoma. AM, FM, shortwave, amateur radio, and more. You'll hear all the latest news from the world of radio each week with Sheldon and Jill on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, July the 4th, 2021. We thank you for tuning in. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill, and we have a guest with us today, Mickey Delmage from Sherwood Park, Alberta. How you doing, Mick?
Good morning. Doing fine.
Very good. Glad to have you with us. We'll get to you in a little bit. I've got some one story for us today that you contributed, and also we'll be talking to you about one of your favorite activities, QSLing. We'll explain what that's all about when we get to that. We thank you for tuning in today. We are here every Sunday with 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio. You can reach us by email, radioreport@yahoo.com. We're live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. CKUT FM in Montreal on 90.3. We have our Facebook group, International Radio Report, where we welcome Tony as a new member this week. And our YouTube channel is youtube.com/International Radio Report, where there are 376 subscribers. And you can catch our show there every week within about an hour after the show airs live on CKUT. So we have a number of different stories for you, so a little bit of local stuff and some other things up and coming on shortwave for you. So we'll start off with a local story on the Montreal scene. It comes to us from Steve Faggy in his Fagstein blog. And the headline is Martz Communications sells at 94.7 Hits FM and Wild Country 96.5 to a religious educational broadcaster. If you're a Montrealer who likes to listen to 94.7 Hits to get music without CRTC regulations, Steve has bad news for us. And if you're a Quebecer who tunes into the weak 96.5 FM frequency because there aren't better country music options on the radio here in the Montreal area, he also has some bad news. Both of those stations, WYUL 94.7 in Chateauguay, New York, and WVNV 96.5 in Malone, New York, have been sold to the Educational Media Foundation, which owns hundreds of stations in all 50 states under the K-Love and Air One brands, both of which broadcast Christian music. Purchase price is $2.5 million, and the deal includes the licenses and transmitter facilities, but not much else. Martz Communications, who own the stations, retains the logos, the branding, studio equipment, and everything having to do with employees. The organization approached me over a year ago and ultimately made me an offer I couldn't refuse, Martz owner Tim Martz said. Given COVID-19's impact on the economy and advertising revenues and the current difficult business climate, it became clear that their offer made sense considering the alternatives, even more so since I recently turned 70 years of age. The stations remain operational for now, and at least for the next 3 months. EMF intends to convert both stations to nonprofit educational stations. It writes to the FCC, quote, EMF's educational goal is to educate its audience with respect to both teachings of the Bible as well as broader topics of contemporary significance, ranging from family issues, money management, philosophical problems and opportunities facing children and young adults, and information concerning the scope and availability of other nonprofit services in the community. As you can imagine, the decision to sell was a very difficult one on a number of levels, Martz says. Since I grew up in Montreal, the stations have a special meaning for me. Both Hits and Wild Country have been serving listeners in Quebec and Ontario for some 20 years, and there are just a lot of fond memories of employees, listeners, and even competitors over the years. As a result of the sale, Martz's office in Pointe Claire, which does Montreal ad sales for Hits FM, will likely close at the end of September, resulting in 6 full-time employees losing their jobs, including on-air host Marty Lamar and Montreal sales boss Tim Thompson. Another office in Cornwall will remain to serve its other border crossing stations, WSNN in Potsdam and WICY on 103.5. So this is going to have an impact on the Montreal radio scene. These were two stations, the Hits station in particular, which was more or less a competitor to the Beat and to Virgin Radio, and its signal got in extremely well into the West Island part of Montreal and out to the western Quebec-Ontario border. So that's those two stations disappearing will have an impact, and certainly the country one as well, because as he said, we really don't have an English language country station in our market here. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm kind of surprised that this religious organization is able to spend that kind of money to buy two radio stations.
Yeah, pretty surprising. It's going to make a big difference for those people across the border that were listening to these U.S. stations for their favorite music.
Yeah, and that's really why the stations were set up where they were. You know, the market in the two cities in the U.S. was not very large, but if he could reach into the Montreal market, particularly the sales advertising market, and he was even able to do some bilingual broadcasting on those stations. I remember there were some French ads running, things that he couldn't do in Quebec on those stations, but he was able to do them being on the American side of the border. So that'll be a big change. They'll be there for a little bit longer, but then they will disappear, and the religious programming will take over on those two frequencies. Our next story is a Canadian story, and Mick, we want to thank you for passing this story along. And some of you out there who listen to CBC Radio, or either over the radio, or if you listen to them online, after 16 seasons, CBC Music moves on from Randy Bachman's regular radio show, Vinyl Tap. This is kind of disappointing, I guess. A show that's been around for a long time is going away. It's by Brad Wheeler from the Globe and Mail. Soon after industry veteran Steve Jordan took over as senior director of CBC Music, he made a phone call to Randy Bachman. I thought he was going to offer me a multi-year contract, said the musician and longtime Vinyl Tap host on the network. Instead, he told me that the show would be canceled following the 2021 season after 16 years on the air. Bachman told the Globe and Mail this week he was stunned at the news. He should not have been. Bachman's preference for nostalgic rock and mainstream pop would seem to be out of step with other CBC Music and Radio 1 programming. The main reason we canceled Vinyl Tap is to get some new voices on the air and also to cover some musical ground. Jordan, formerly the executive director of the Polaris Music Prize, told the Globe. CBC Music needs to do its best to reflect the country, and I found that there are some areas of the country that are not being reflected. Since its inception in 2005, Vinyl Tap has tended to feature classic radio sounds, supplemented by backstage stories and upbeat musicology, told by the chatty veteran musician of the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive fame. Bachman was not shy about playing some of his own songs. The guitar riff to BTO's Taking Care of Business was the theme music, and the show's playlist didn't always live up to the taxpayer-funded network's mandate of 50% Canadian content. Bachman CBC finale aired in a 3-hour Canada Day special on Thursday from 3 to 6 p.m. Vinyl Tap isn't necessarily a thing of the past. Bachman is currently in discussions with private radio networks in Canada to carry the show nationally. The idea is to buy 2 hours of radio time on Saturday nights and finance the show with sponsors rather than selling commercials. I'm already planning my next 12 episodes, Bachman said. I'm going to continue my show for my listeners on channels they already listen to, which are classic rock stations. I am going forward. In the meantime, Bachman has been doing on-air shifts on Sirius XM satellite radio. Now, Mick, you tuned in actually to the last broadcast, the 3-hour special, and I think you had a few observations.
I listened to the 3-hour special, which will be edited for further repeats during the week here on CBC. But the 3-hour special, being on Canada Day, of course, featured 100% Canadian music. And like the Globe and Mail report says, he tended to be more nostalgic. So we have a lot of really good Canadian artists and a lot of really good new Canadian artists that are played around the world, and the only one that I could say that he played that's the current is the Weeknd. Other than that, it was back to into the 60s and the 70s. And as the report said, he wasn't shy about playing his own songs. So he did play, of course, Bachman Turner Overdrive with You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. He played Prairie Town, a song he wrote about Winnipeg and recorded with Neil Young. And, of course, American Woman by the Guess Who. And then he played a Troopers song. And of course, he produced Troopers' early albums, but he wasn't shy about talking about his relationship with Trooper and how he basically did all their albums, which is probably a little incorrect. And, of course, as I mentioned, the theme of the song was Bachman Turner Overdrive is Taking Care of Business, and that's what ended the 16-year run on CBC. So, interesting show. I will miss it. I wasn't listening as much as I used to because it was getting a little repetitive, and it'll be interesting to see what's the new shows that are going to be replacing his. They seem to be gearing to our multicultural aspect of here in Canada with some of the shows that are mentioned.
Yeah, we had the story last week of the taste test on CBC Radio 1 in Montreal being cut after many years, which was a segment of the morning daybreak show once a week where they played a new release by an artist and talked about it a little bit. So that got pulled as well. So there's quite a bit of change going on within CBC 1. And I think they're gearing much more of the music over to CBC Music and the Radio 2 network. So anyways, it's kind of sad after that many years, but I think it will live on. Someone will pick it up. Classic rock stations are kind of disappearing a little bit, though. It's not one of the big formats in radio right now, but I'm sure they'll find a new home for it.
There's a station here in Edmonton that's more of top 40, but they do on the weekends have one of the older disc jockeys play the classic rock, so shrinking the amount of time of classic rock, and we have to move forward.
That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
It's
right.
like what we were talking about, those personalities. Well, there's people going away now, and it's going to definitely change what radio is all about.
It sure was interesting to listen to the show and see over the years how many really good international artists come out of Canada. You forget about some of these guys and people.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't like the idea of Canadian content on Canadian radio when it started, but probably a lot of those bands that got international success and recognition was as a result of their exposure on the radio.
Definitely.
We have a couple stories, Jill, for some upcoming programming.
Yep, there's some interesting stuff for those that think shortwave is dead. It's really not. So we had this story a couple of about a month and a half ago. Paul Walker, that is going to do again a Friday night request show dance party thingy from the station KSKO in McGrath, Alaska. And of course, this is going to be rebroadcast live via WRMI. So he says, join me for the Friday night request show dance party thingy from KSKO 89.5 in McGrath, Alaska. It'll take place Saturday, July 10th. That's Friday evening for North America, by the way. Saturday, July 10th at 03 to 05 UTC. It's on 7780 to the East Coast of the U.S. and Western Europe, 7730 to the West Coast of the U.S., Canada, along with Hawaii and the South Pacific, and 4980 to the Caribbean and South America. He's going to be taking phone calls with requests during the show, as it's truly a live show. No station money was spent for this. It's coming out of my pocket, he says, just to have something different up on shortwave for a few hours. So that is coming up this Friday evening, North America, Saturday, July 10th, UTC 03 to 05 UT. I think this is going to be fun. 7780 and 7730. and 4980 kilohertz. Another interesting thing happening, Texas Radio Shortwave to host European free radio and low-powered licensed stations via WRMI for 9 weeks in July and August. This is via Terry Colgan, Austin, Texas. Texas Radio Shortwave will host a series of 1-hour programs by European free radio and low-power licensed stations during July and August. The programs will be broadcast every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That is Saturday at 02 UTC on WRMI Okeechobee, Florida on 5800 kilohertz. EQSLs will be available from individual stations. Do not send for EQSLs to Texas Radio Shortwave. One that played last Friday, which was Radio Igloo in Sweden, but upcoming July 10th is Charleston Radio International, Germany. July 17th, Radio Merlin, UK. July 24th, Radio Monique International in the Netherlands. 31st of July, Cool AM Radio, the Netherlands. August 7th will be Qubit Radio, Netherlands. August 14th, Free Radio Service Holland from the Netherlands. Lots of pirates in the Netherlands from what I see. August 21st, Atlantic 2000 International from France. And August the 28th will be Radio Delta International from the Netherlands. So, just put that on your calendar. Every Friday evenings, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 0200 Saturday on 5800 for some really nice programming out of, European pirates. We don't hear them a lot here in North America. So this is your time to listen to some of these European pirates that will be rebroadcast thanks to WRMI. And what's happening with the sun? Well, the sun is getting very active. There's a big sunspot group right now, and it's still growing, actually, making the solar flux go to 94 as we are recording, which is a pretty good number, getting higher frequencies. Of course, there is chances of solar flares because it's growing and it's got some twisted magnetic fields. So it wouldn't be surprised that we could have a solar flare and some disturbances in the propagation conditions. There's also a coronal hole, a solar wind flowing from this hole might reach Earth on July 5th, and that could also spark some unsettled conditions. But lots of sporadic E-skip actually being reported also in the past week. It is prime time for this. 10 meters, 11 meters. Take a listen. There's a lot of stuff. And those higher frequencies when that happens. And with the rising solar flux, might be a lot of stuff to listen to above, 20, 25 megahertz. So take a listen to that. And of course, the best way to do it is to turn on that radio and listen.
We mentioned off the top of the show that we have Mickey Delmage with us from Sherwood Park, Alberta. Mickey is Vice President of the Canadian International DX Club and also the column editor of the very interesting column, which deals with the subject of QSLs. Now, we always have new listeners to the program, some who don't do shortwave listening, who just like what we talk about radio on the local scene, what have you. So I guess we should start with explaining what is a QSL?
Well, QSL is the amateur radio term for verification. I did hear your signal. And what happened in the early days of radio, in the AM radio, is that stations would offer these verification cards to listeners that would report hearing these new stations that came on here in the 20s and around the world and in North America. And they would respond to these reports with these colorful and unique QSL cards. That carried on through the shortwave world into the 70s and 80s, and is starting to slowly go away. I guess the main reason, back in the 70s and 80s, it cost stations quite a bit to print these cards. But postage was not so bad, but that has reversed. Now the cards are easily printed and cheaply printed, but postage costs are very high going around the world. So now what is coming out is a thing called EQSLs, or electronic QSLs. And some people, when this first started, didn't really like that. They preferred opening that mailbox, the excitement of opening the mailbox with a letter with colorful stamps from far off places. And now these EQSLs are pretty attractive, and I wish more stations did that, especially in the medium wave world. It would really bring back the interest of collecting such cards, and you can print these cards on your own.
Yep.
When you went back to the beginning, though, of the origins of QSLs, it was really important for stations to get reception reports from the target areas. They were trying to reach different parts of the world, and they wanted to know that their signals were getting through. They didn't at the beginning have these big fancy monitoring stations and the ability to monitor, so they relied on amateur listeners to send them reports of, how well is our signal getting through. But that kind of faded after a while, I guess. And it was a courtesy, really, for stations to send these QSL cards back to listeners. It wasn't compulsory, but some QSL collectors seem to think that it was, I think.
Some guys have got hundreds or 200s of from one station, and, not spreading the wealth around. And so, it got to a point where some stations quit QSLing altogether and relied on monitors around the world to give them reports on their signal strength and interference. That's one of the main things is back in the day on shortwave, things are very crowded. Trying to reach a target area, say Radio Canada was trying to hit Australia, and they pick a clear frequency that's here in North America, but down in Australia, there all these other stations interfering, and so that was the idea behind these reports.
Now they could simply go online and listen to an online SDR and hear how well their signals.
Absolutely, and that's one thing that Terry Colgan and I discussed last week. He reported to my column, heads up, spoiler alert for you messenger readers, he reported to my column a lot of European pirates. Now, of course, they're impossible to hear in North America here with the low power that these stations are. So he was using remote receivers on the East Coast of North America or in Europe. And he, he's not trying to fool anybody that he's sitting down in Austin, Texas, hearing these, milliwatt stations or 100-watt stations down there. And so when he did receive the EQSLs, he got the stations to indicate on the QSLs where he was listening, what SDR site he was listening to. And that's pretty cool. And that's, something that some guys haven't hooked onto yet, and the shortwave world there's been some questions about that, but I think again, these EQSLs are pretty neat. One example, our ACE medium wave DXer Nigel Pibnett in Medicine Hat, he logged Radio Egypt. I don't know if it's Radio Cairo, but on medium wave, and they have a beautiful EQSL, and that's pretty neat. That a station who we don't hear on shortwave anymore, unfortunately, and was not the easiest station to QSL, actually put a really neat EQSL out.
This is how QSL will stay alive, because that is inexpensive, easy to put together, and anybody can send out an EQSL. And talking about SDRs online, people, reporting from these SDRs, I have no problem with that as long as you're clear that you are listening off one of the SDRs somewhere through an SDR in the Netherlands, for example. I was not hearing you from home. If you're clear as to where you're listening from, what you're using, and once again, EQSLs are great. And like you said, you can print them. I print them on photo paper. It makes beautiful QSLs.
Absolutely. And with your, EQSLs, also you're reporting electronically. And what guys do now is they add a little audio file. And that gives the station way more idea what's going on and where they're being heard and how they're being heard than the old days of man talks, woman talks, music, laughter.
Now, what's happening in the ham radio world with respect to QSLing now, though? This is a whole different world. Hams exchange QSL cards. It was a really big thing. Are things changing in the ham world as well?
For sure they are. They have the option of using what's called the QSL Bureau, where you can send your cards to a main bureau in whatever country you're in, and then they ship them off overseas, and it gets sorted out in Canada here and distributed. But that can take 1, maybe 2 years for you to receive your QSL. Some guys still want paper, they're paper chasers, but no, there are a lot EQSLing now in the ham world. Once you made a contact, you can upload it, and there's security behind it, so you can't fool anybody. And you upload, you made this contact, and then if you're both on that site, you can see that you've got your QSL, your contact was confirmed. Because a lot of it, when it comes to amateur radio, it has to go to not contesting, but certificates. The 100 countries heard, verified kind of thing, and there can't be any fooling there, like there has been maybe in the SDR world with some of the guys using SDRs in the shortwave world. I know one particular club has a column where you kind of enter. This is where you are in the world, countries heard, countries verified. And there's one guy that's 100%, and I don't think that's ever happened.
That's possible.
Yeah, it's the world's changing, the radio world is changing, and so this little sort of subculture within our radio hobby is changing as well. Yep. And some people are not happy with it, others are. If you want to learn more about it, there's lots of sites out there available. Within our CIDX club, we have Mickey's column, which features QSLs that different people are getting. You recently got one from the newly reactivated shortwave relay in Calgary. We're actually going to print it in this upcoming July issue of Messenger, and that was an EQSL.
That was an EQSL, and that was handled by a club member from the Ontario DX Association, Harold Sellers, and their club looks after QSLs for that CFBP in Calgary, and it's VP, right. And also the CFRB in Toronto. And that's a good service, and it's something CIDX was a part of back with Radio Canada days when they stopped QSLing. One of our members, the late Bill Westenhaver, offered to do that, and as a volunteer, eventually he became employed by RCI. So, that's something that, clubs, I wish maybe some more clubs around the world could take up that with a lot of stations.
All right. Well, we're quickly running out of time. We want to get in a couple of quick notes about some upcoming ham radio contests, and a couple of them have special certificates as well, talking about QSLing. We've got a couple coming up. The IARU HF World Championships is 1200 Zulu July 10th to 1200 Zulu July 11th. It's sponsored by ARRL, and it's 160 through 10 meters, no work bands. We've got a QRP contest, the Summer Homebrew Sprint, sponsored by QRP Quarterly. It's a CW QRP only, 160 through 10 meters. And finally, a special event that we've been participating in the last few days, the 13 Colonies special event, July 1st, 1300 to July 7th, 0400. You can look up 13colonies.us, and there are special ham stations from the original 13 colonies using the call signs K2A through K2M, and a special certificate is available if you work the stations, and you also can do it as a shortwave listener. So we'll put up the links to all of these, and the 13 Colonies was quite a lot of fun. I spent some time with that on Canada Day, as well as the Canada Day contest that we talked about last week, and a lot of fun to try and see how many of these stations you can log. Mix, thank you for joining us here today and talking about QSLs a little bit. We will be back again next Sunday with our next edition of the program. We hope you can tune in then. We thank you for listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week, everybody.
Happy 4th of July to our American friends.
Yes.
Definitely. Happy 4th of July to everyone.
Bye-bye.